The director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Asylum Division was pushed out earlier this month. In a report, an asylum officer speaking out about the Trump administration's, quote, supervillain attacks on immigrants and the changes that they're making to the asylum process. Debbie Nathan wrote that piece for The Intercept. She's an independent journalist, and she joins me now from El Paso, Texas. Debbie, thank you for joining us. I want to ask you about the officer who took issue with the migrant protection protocols. Explain to us what those are and what happened exactly here.
Yes, the migrant protection protocols they were instituted a few months ago on the West Coast and then moving into Western Texas, and now they're all the way down into the entire border, South Texas as well. And it used to be that migrants would come to the border and they would just walk across the bridge and ask for asylum at a port of entry. And what the protocols do is they turn people back and they force them to live in border cities. There are now 42,000 asylum seekers living in border cities, many of them literally on the streets with no place to live. Some of them in shelters, but these are very dangerous situations for migrants. As a reporter, I've found and interviewed people who've been kidnapped, women who've been raped. So basically, it's a program to keep people out of the United States who have the legal right to seek asylum. And U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services traditionally has had highly trained officers who interview people who come into the United States seeking asylum and really conform to the letter of immigration law and trying to afford these people their rights to appear before a judge and make their claim for asylum. But they're not able to do that anymore, because they're stuck in Mexico. Every couple of months, they're brought in to courts where the vast majority of them have no lawyers, because there are almost no U.S. attorneys who will go to Mexico.
Can you tell me sort of a little bit about what this officer told you about the process of interviewing asylum seekers and how that process is changing?
Yeah, well, first of all, the interviewers traditionally have been very well trained, as I mentioned, and they have done very long, careful interviews with asylum seekers. And so now it turns out that they are being replaced with CBP or Customs and Border Protection officers with very little training, very little education. I think it's safe to say that none of them, or very few, have legal backgrounds, if any. And so the asylum officer who I spoke with said that not only are these border agents very ill-trained, but a lot of them seem to be misrepresenting what the answers that they're given in these interviews, and maybe even lying about what they're told. And so that the rate of refusal now is really sky high compared to what it was when the trained citizenship officers were doing the work.
And what are the consequences of Border Patrol agents conducting these interviews instead of the actual asylum officers?
Well, as I mentioned, it leads to very, very few positive findings, so that people are dumped back into Mexico again. And then ultimately what the asylum officer is worried about is that it's going to end up that nobody is going to be admitted into the United States. The detention centers will be emptied out because, of course, a lot of times when people are admitted, they're put into detention to finish the process. When the detention centers are emptied out, then people who are picked up in the interior of the U.S., a good example would be the Mississippi chicken workers, the mass raid in Mississippi, that people like that will be put into these detention centers. And so this is a move really to deport people even from the interior.
When you talk about the allegations that there was fake paperwork and distortion, what did CBP have to say about those allegations?
Well, I asked them about that, and they answered in a very sort of boilerplate, generic way. They just said, you know, the lawyers for DHS and the process for DHS is to make sure that everything's done by the book, but they didn't answer that question at all, really.
Debbie Nathan, I'm so grateful you could join us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.